We're now going to take a look at assigning roles. So you may or may not be familiar with the different access control models. So for many years, going all the way back to the paper-based documentation days, where access control was managed through paper-based solutions, there's been a lot of different models and strategies that organizations have used to control permissions over certain objects, as well as administrative rights over documentation. And one of the models we're going to take a look at here, this is the model that Microsoft sort of puts all of their focus on in regards to their cloud. It's known as RBAC, Role-Based Access Control. Along with that, there actually was some other models and some other models that can be implemented in your environment as well. There's a model called DAC, which involves discretionary access control, which is really just all about ownership. The owner makes decisions. And if you look back at Active Directory in the past, you may note that that's one of the main ways that we dealt with rights in our environment was based on ownership. So we would create a file, and if you were the owner of the file, you had full control over it, and then you could grant other people access. And you can still use the DAC model to this day in your environment if you want, and or in the cloud obviously as well. Now you've also got MAC, Mandatory Access Control. Mandatory Access Control is where we're basing our rights and permissions on classification, labels, being able to label documentation and classify it. And then, of course, when I think of MAC, I sort of think of the military, because it'll involve things like security clearances, security levels. So, like in the military, you have secret and top secret and all of that. And then finally, we have RBAC, which is the one we care about right now. RBAC is Role-Based Access Control. And the way that role-based access control works is the privileges or the rights that you're given are based upon the role you play in the organization. Okay, so there's two different ways you can sort of look at RBAC and manage RBAC in your environment. One is from a user's perspective, where we're granting a privilege over some kind of a resource in our Azure environment based upon roles. And then the other is from the administrative perspective. So in the MS 500 exam, they're going to put a big emphasis on dealing with it from the administrative perspective. So we're going to be focusing on that right now. So RBAC is going to allow an administrator to grant other administrators privileges to things in your environment, control over your environment. This is going to include both Azure as well as your Microsoft 365 environment. What you're going to find is you've got a mix of roles. Some of the roles are going to be in the Azure portal, which is what we're going to sort of focus on right now. And then a little bit later, we're going to also focus on the Microsoft 365 side, where you're going to see that there are some roles that are specific to the security of Microsoft 365. Okay, so one thing I really love about roles is roles allow us to see exactly what privileges our users are getting, our administrators are getting. One of the annoying things about group-based access control, which, going back years and years with ADDS, Active Directory Domain Services, you might recall that you would create a group, you'd put people in the group, you would then assign permissions to the group and give them the rights they need. But then here's the problem. There was nothing that really documented what rights those groups had. I mean, you could go to the access control list of the resource, like let's say it's a file server, and you go to the share or the folder or whatever, the file, and look at the permissions over that file, the ACL, the access control list. But then the issue is you'd have to do that for every file and folder you wanted to see if you wanted to see if that group actually had rights to that object. There was no way for you just to simply go to the group and see everything the group had gotten access to. Don't get me wrong, there were some tools out there that could sort of kind of make this happen. You could actually make it happen with PowerShell if you wrote a script that went through, but you're talking loads and loads of processing power just to get it to spider its way across your environment to determine what rights that this group had. And so what can happen is you create a group, you grant it permission, you add people to it, And then over time, more people get added to it, and it gets given more permissions and more permissions. Next thing you know, 5 years down the road, this object, this group, has gotten access to all sorts of crazy things in your environment, and you have no way really knowing. And it really got difficult. So you could kind of, sort of achieve RBAC with groups if you created a hierarchical group, but and I'm going to tell you, as being a consultant all these years too, I can say that almost nobody ever implemented that system. Unless I implemented it myself, rarely did anybody actually design a group hierarchy that worked to achieve an RBAC system. Now, in Microsoft 365 and Azure, the great thing about roles, the way they've designed it, I really feel like Microsoft got this right. The way they designed it, okay, you create a role, you then assign the rights to the role, and the role records exactly what rights it has, and they're documented on the role itself. And they used JSON. Okay, if you're familiar with that, the Java language, JSON, and the way it works with JSON in this case with RBAC is every time a right is given, it has to be added to that role. So there's no way that the role can be given rights to things and you not know. Okay, and then from there you can assign identities to that role and give those users rights. So you could add users or groups or whatever you want to those roles. And of course, identities can have more access to more than one role. So if I have a user who needs to be able to control Intune but not control Exchange, or maybe I have a user who needs to control Intune as well as SharePoint but not Exchange, I could have this user given the Intune administrator role and the SharePoint administrator role but not the Exchange administrator role. So it gives me that ability to do this next thing, which is the principle of least privilege. So if you're not familiar with that term, that's another sort of cybersecurity term that you hear out there. Least privilege involves giving out the least amount of rights, but still allowing somebody to do their job. Okay, so giving out the least amount of rights, but still allowing them to do their job. All right. I do a lot of classes on military bases and things, and I know a lot of times I have to have them like vouch for me to get into the military base, and they give me a pass, and sometimes I have to be escorted in a building to my classroom, and I'm surprised I don't have to be escorted to the bathroom. But in those classes, that's an example of least privilege. They're giving me the least amount of rights to get on the base, to get into my classroom, do my class, and then leave. So I've had the honor of teaching a lot of military guys, a lot of cybersecurity classes, and all of that, and that's what always comes to my brain when I think of least privilege. But the logic is this. Okay, so if you've got somebody who only needs to perform a certain action, then you should give out the bare minimum rights that they need. Okay, as opposed to giving too many rights. All right, I'll never forget the very first company I ever worked for in the 1990s as an administrator. I was a junior level admin, and they're like, "Congratulations, you're hired." So I get hired, and they put me. They give me access to, this was an NT network, so I get access to a tool called User Manager for Domains. Some of you guys might remember that old tool. And I open it up, and I notice that there's like 80 people that are domain admins, and I'm one of them. So they're kind of like, "Congratulations, you're hired." And then all of a sudden I'm a domain admin, and there's like 80 people that are domain admins. And I start looking through the list, and I'm like, wait a minute, that guy's a sales guy. Why is he a domain admin? You know what I mean? So that's an example of not using least privilege. And I think sometimes people in their environments get too much into giving these rights out when to just achieve something. The person wants to install programs on their computer. Let's make them a domain admin. That was sort of the logic. So you definitely, in today's world, with the amount of cybersecurity issues that we have, we definitely want to use least privilege. And Microsoft highly encourages this. And one tip I'll give you on the exam is that always assume they want least privilege. So if you're looking at a scenario where they're saying, "Hey, this user needs the ability to go in and make changes to Intune," okay, as an administrator, but you don't want them having control over the entire Azure environment, or even heck, even if they don't say that, assume least privilege is always what they want. Okay. That's going to be one tip I give you. So I'm not going to make the person a global administrator. The global administrator role is the most powerful role that you can have in Azure Microsoft 365. You basically have, as I like to say, intergalactic cosmic powers over Azure and Microsoft 365 if you're a global admin. Yes, you can control Intune, but you can also control everything else, and that's too many rights for people. Now, another thing that's really cool about our environments is Microsoft has implemented PIM. PIM is Privileged Identity Management. Okay, PIM allows us to achieve JIT, which is Just-in-Time Administration. Just-in-Time administration means I can give out role access temporarily. It can be scheduled and it can go away after a certain amount of time. Another thing that can happen is a user can request permissions, request privileges for a certain amount of time if they need to. So, if you have an admin that's going on vacation and this person is the one who creates accounts, for example, and then you could give this privilege over to somebody else while you're on vacation. This person could request that access, get it for a temporary amount of time, utilize that control, create the account, and then of course the privileges go away. So just-in-time administration is all part of this privileged identity management, which of course builds upon roles.